And we would like to welcome our guest this morning, Lenny Corso. Welcome, Lenny, and a special guest, Steve Miller, who used to fly like an eagle. Is that correct, Steve?
That's correct.
And we'll get to that later. His entourage is here, so they're kind of taking up the whole parking lot. So we'll have to get this going pretty soon, so him and his entourage can get on their way to the next concert, right?
Right.
If the buses are rocking, don't come a knocking, is that how it works?
Exactly. Just a couple of programming notes before we go on. We'll mention it to you a little bit later. We will not be on tonight from the Wild Rose Brewery, nor tomorrow from Sip Coffee. There's one of us will be traveling.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Sort of.
as she constantly reminds everyone, is that it's for work.
It is for work.
Yeah, so
I'm a travel agent, and this is an important thing to do.
yeah, and what exactly related to work that you're going to be doing?
I'm going to be on a Mediterranean cruise to Greece, Italy, and Malta. But it's a seminar at sea. I'm learning while I'm there so that I can better serve my clients.
Do you hear that?
The crying in the background.
The violins, the crying in the background, and
I know.
I wonder. Oh, someone's starting a GoFundMe
They
page
should.
for you.
They should.
So with that, we'll just get on to business. We want to welcome an old friend of ours and kind of a fan when we pay him. As long as we pay him, he continues to be a fan. Lenny Corso, welcome to the show, Lenny. And Lenny is going to be talking about a very important program that we're really behind. We try to support it as much as we physically and emotionally can, and that is the Veterans Appreciation Dinner. And so, Lenny, do you want to tell us, first of all, give us an idea what the history was behind the dinner and how it got started and who's involved in it?
Sure. Last year, the Kiwanis Club of Valparaiso and the Rotary Club of Valparaiso decided to merge our two veterans programs together and move it to an evening program. Rotary had a fine program, but it was at lunch. We had a fine program with Kiwanis, but it was in lunch, and not very many people who can take an hour and a half off for lunch. I had a number of people who asked me, I would love to take my grandfather, my father program, take him to dinner to show my appreciation. They just couldn't do it at lunch. Last year, we moved it to the evening time. It was at the Old Town Banquet Center here in Valparaiso on Calumet Avenue. And we weren't sure. We knew that they could sit 400 people in there, and we sold the place out.
Yeah, you did.
We sold. I mean, both of you were gracious in purchasing a table last year. You purchased a table this year, and you're donating many of your tickets to veterans, and we certainly appreciate that. It is just incredible. It was a packed house. Parking was tight last year, but we had a great speaker, great food. And of course, all of the amenities that go along with that, the patriotic music. And every veteran that comes to this Veterans Appreciation Dinner is honored by name, and they get a chance to stand, and if they can't stand, their guardian will stand for them. Last year, we had a 99-year-old and a 98-year-old veteran, and we're hoping they're still around, and we're hoping maybe they can make it this year as well.
Wonderful.
But it was an awesome tribute. We had rave reviews. And we're doing it again this year. If we sell out again this year, we might have to look at a larger venue in the future.
Excellent.
There's no question, I'll add, there's no question that there's nothing that is a larger tribute to veterans in Northwest Indiana than this dinner, as I know it right now. And we're going to make it larger in the future.
That's
Perfect,
great.
yes.
You know, as we go on, I guess I do this more and more as I get older. I began thinking about when I was young, the veterans that were still with us and those actually World War I. And I remember one, and it was big news, there was one, I'm not sure it was a widow or actually a person who fought in the Civil War, but this is when I was a small kid. Yeah, don't mention that. So, and as we go on now, we're looking at what I would consider good Korean veterans, and so that, and again, these are people who some were drafted, but nowadays we're undrafted. A lot of them were, volunteered to go in. A lot of people, even when there was a draft, volunteered to go in. And this is a very appropriate way of saying thanks for all you did, so that, and we got something coming up on November 6th, and they fought for that right for us to vote. And, all through World War II and prior, so amazing amount of courage in this room, and I think it's very fitting that we try to do something for them. And I know you two fine gentlemen have served our country, and we would like to thank you on behalf of the station and us, and for everything you did. And so tell us a bit about what goes on at the dinner, maybe.
Okay. Well, first of all, you mentioned that Election Day is on Tuesday, November 6th. The Veterans Appreciation Dinner is the next day, November the 7th, from 5:30 to 8:30 at the Old Town Banquet Center. Most people started arriving around 5 p.m. We have handicap parking. We have handicap accessibility. So there's really no reason for people not to be able to attend the function. It started out last year that we have the dinner, we have a cash bar, there's a lot of socialization, and some people have some Marine buttons on, and some are Army and some are Air Force and Navy, and there's this little inter-service rivalry that still goes on.
Sure.
And who's the better pilot and who's the better grunt and whatever. But it was a lot of fun. And around 6 o'clock, we will have the honor guard. This year it'll be the Valparaiso Police Department that will be the honor guard. And we just are in the process of securing our speaker. I do not have the name in front of me, but I know it's an Air Force colonel that will be our guest speaker. We then eat approximately 6:15 until about 7 to 7:15, at which time then we will introduce all of the individuals who are veterans in the audience who get to stand. So it's very personalized. Then our speaker will speak, and if all goes well, we'll get out on time at around 8:30 in the evening. And for us old people, we like to be in bed by 9 o'clock. So it's a wonderful thing, and we this year we're a little more sophisticated. Anytime you do something the first time, you try to dot all your I's and cross your T's. But we really promoted the flyer, which I think you have a copy of
Right.
on
We can
your
put that on the
electronically.
screen now.
And last year, and the way we're going now, we're going to sell out probably before November 1st.
Right.
Amazing. So one other event that we want to talk about before, it's kind of related, and it's a veterans dinner. Applebee's does something around that very same time. Do they not?
We've had the Kiwanis Club specifically has had a wonderful relationship with the Valparaiso Applebee's. It's been, I think Applebee's started about 7 years ago to honor veterans, and it started at the Valparaiso store. They just said, come, they said, show an ID and you'll get a free meal from us. Well, maybe some of the World War II guys, maybe the Korean guys, they still had their old IDs. I know from my era, the Vietnam era, we had to turn our IDs back in, so we didn't have them. And so I just said to get more people to come, you'd almost just have to be on the honor system, and they wear a hat or some piece of clothing designated the branch of service. And when they did that, the line went out the door, down one side of the building and down to the back side of the building. And it became very popular. And it took off. After about the third year to fourth year, Applebee's went national with it. When Applebee's went national with it, then you saw all the other restaurants that started to follow suit, which was great. They say, well, it's copycat. Well, it's good for everyone.
That's right.
Everybody wins. The restaurant wins by promoting for veterans, and it's long overdue. We're finally in an era where we're actually honoring veterans because post-Vietnam there was such an anti-war, anti-veteran sentiment, back in basically in the 70s and up to about 1980 or so. And it wasn't until 1991 when we had the Gulf War that, we kicked some tail on that one, and then things changed from that point on.
Yeah, which is a shame when we look back at
Right.
the Vietnam era, that there was political environment that just was not welcoming for fine veterans that were serving on our behalf. And I guess people just forgot about that when they went out in their pickets and protests, and forgot that these guys were, first of all, over there. They may not had a choice because there was a draft. Many of them didn't have a choice. Some did. But yet, that sometimes in a political environment gets forgotten about, and that is a shame. And there's some beautiful memorials to the Vietnam War, and those are probably even more meaningful in that we've waited this long to honor the Vietnam vets because of that political environment, which is a shame.
We're changing that. And let me add before I forget this, is that Applebee's will have their program on Veterans Day, which I believe it's Sunday this year, November the 11th.
Oh, it's not Monday the following?
No,
I may have
it's on
misinformed some
Saturday.
people then.
It's always on the day.
D-Day.
D-Day.
All right.
The day, and it'll be from 11 a.m. until roughly about 11 p.m. or midnight. And
All right.
it's a great environment. I often, tongue-in-cheek, say it's like a college bar, but people have gray hair or no hair when they attend. But there's a lot of camaraderie.
And
Yes, there is.
And there-
talking about a well-attended event. Boy,
Yes.
the last couple of years, it's just been full, not an open seat.
And we even let friends like my dear friend here from the Air Force in on that one, too.
Right.
You're so
And
nice.
before we
You're so
get, we
nice.
do have to turn the mic over to him because he's got quite a story to tell.
He certainly does.
And so, Lenny, we appreciate you coming in and talking with us, and we will be happy to see these vets again on November 7th.
We look forward to seeing you.
And so any information, we'll have the information on our website where you can go and buy tickets. And again, thank you
You're welcome.
much.
You're welcome.
Just a real quick, do any of the Rotary or Kiwanis members have tickets to sell as well, or do they have to go to the bank to
Good
get them?
point. Yes. If you know any Rotarian or any Kiwanian for the Valparaiso clubs, they will have tickets
As well, okay.
And I'll put the plug in. Rotary meets at the Old Town Banquet Center from 11:30 to 1 on Mondays, and Kiwanis meets from 11:30 to 1 on Wednesdays at the Old Town Banquet
Okay.
Center. Thank you for that
Okay,
clarification.
thanks.
All right, thank you, Lenny. And we'd like to introduce our next guest. And all kidding aside, he used to fly like an eagle, so that is some commonality
true.
with the other person named Steve Miller. So for those of you who are jumping out, so Steve Miller's at WVLP. Calm down.
Well, he is, just not the one they're thinking of, possibly.
Right. Well, actually, he just had a concert in Hammond,
Yes,
right?
he did.
So yeah, we caught him on the way back, right? So with that, we'd like to thank you for again being our guest today. And why don't you tell us a bit about yourself?
Well, thanks, Bill Kelly, for inviting me. I am Steve Miller. I'm a Vietnam vet. I was blue suiter. I served with the Air Force. I sometimes refer to it more like Southeast Asia because I flew out of Ubon Royal Thai Air Force Base in Thailand from December of 71 to December of 72 as a member of the 497th Tactical Fighter Squadron, the Night Owls. We were the only fighter squadron during the Vietnam War that was purely dedicated to night flying. And I had a one-year tour over there. I flew 251 combat missions. 107 of those were over North Vietnam. And I was very fortunate. I achieved my two goals, a longevity ribbon and no Purple Hearts.
Yes.
And was very fortunate someone was looking out for me and made it home.
And we got to remind people, back in the 70s and 60s, the technology was not existent to, guide pilots. So it's pretty much by sight, right?
By sight. We tell people, they ask, well, did you have night vision? Do you have any of that? No. We didn't have any of the really magic stuff. We did have laser-guided weapons, but what we did at night was either a night attack or we did things under flare light at night. I was what we called a fast FAC. I was a fast-moving forward air controller. We worked in North Vietnam and very northern MR1 South Vietnam. Basically, the threat was so high, the slow-moving FACs, the O1s, the O2s, the OV10s couldn't survive. So we went in there as forward air controllers in the F4, and we did our stuff at night.
Now, when you say you made it home, where was home for you? Was this home for you, or did you
No.
live somewhere else at the time?
No, actually, I'm from a small town in Wisconsin called Green Bay.
Oh, yeah, that
Oh,
small
here's some
little town.
Bill's cutting me off right now. But no, I'm from Wisconsin. I went through ROTC and got commissioned, went in the Air Force, and ended up with an F4, volunteered for Southeast Asia, and just about everybody did back then, and ended up over there in December of '71.
Wow.
Oh, awesome. It's, I mean, awesome your service to this nation and this country, and
And that you made it back.
yeah, made it back, and yeah, thank you. Now, again, I had to think about technology. So really, the technology is eating carrots, right? Did you have a regimen of carrots?
For night
You can
vision,
see it.
yeah.
Yes.
No.
And you were the forward guy, which means they're kind of like running recon for the rest of the group.
Right. We would, in the Night Owl Squadron, when you got there, you flew some of the more basic missions, basically dropping bombs, working with a forward air controller. We escorted the AC-130 Spectre gunships. We were the flak control for them, or attempted to. And after you'd been there for a while, if you wanted to volunteer, you could volunteer to be a fast FAC, a fast forward air controller. Not everyone did it, not everyone wanted to do it. So we would go out there and we'd study the intel, and we'd talk to the day forward air controllers, the fast FACs, the day FACs, and find out where the targets were. We were mainly interdiction, trying to stop the trucks and stuff, the surface-to-air missiles, trying to find them coming south. And we would go out there, put flares out, find the targets, and then we would have strike flights that were either assigned to us or got sent to us, and we would describe the target and get them in on it. And we carried smoke rockets, Willie Pete's, we called them, white phosphorus smoke rockets, and we'd talk them into the target to put their bombs on it. And a normal mission, we'd take off, we'd hit the tanker, we'd fill back up with gas, we'd run into North Vietnam. People always wonder, they say, how didn't they see it? Well, we turned the lights off. The airplane, we had black bellies on the airplanes, and we turned the lights off. And so we'd go in there and we'd work 25 minutes plus or minus. We burned a lot of gas because we didn't want to get slow. About 400 knots was about as slow as we wanted to get. And then we'd head back out and hit another tanker, and we'd repeat this scenario 3 or 4 times before we went home. And sometimes we had great success, other times not so much.
Well, we do have to take care of one piece of business here before someone comes running in here on a recon mission, and that is our station break. So we will be back with you in about a minute.
You are listening to The Bill and Callie Show on WVLP LP 103.1 FM and streaming live at WVLP.org or on your TuneIn app. We are broadcasting live from the historic 1 Center Street building in beautiful Valparaiso, Indiana. The Bill and Callie Show is underwritten by Bill Moran and Callie Rosala. Now, here are your hosts, Bill and Callie.
You were pretty much what?
Welcome
6'8"?
back.
Okay.
Ask that question, because that was interesting
Oh,
to me.
okay. I was just asking my good friend here that when they flew the missions, Vietnam was, from what I remember, for the flight sorties and packages, Vietnam was broken up into sectors. One being for the south, Sector 2, Sector 3, 4, 5, and then 6A and 6B sectors were over Hanoi. And I was just asking Steve if that was one of his primary sectors.
Okay.
Yeah, as a fast fact, we generally worked in South Vietnam was we called MR1, Military Region 1, which was up north by the DMZ, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 down south. North Vietnam was divided into what we called route packages, or Route Pack 1 was just above the DMZ. That's where we primarily worked as fast facts. It was Route Pack 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 was the Haiphong area, if I remember, and then 6 and 6A were the Hanoi area up there.
Okay.
And yeah, Haiphong may have been in 6A. I can't remember exactly. So we, as fast facts, now I've been all the way up. At night I've been up to, well, south of the China border, not real close. We weren't supposed to go there, but from there down to Hanoi, Haiphong, southbound. But most of our fast fact work was in Route Package 1, trying to shut the DMZ and the passes off into Laos.
Steve, if I can ask you this, the rules of engagement for you guys back then. For example, you're going on a mission, and then of course, you have your mission assignment, but then you see something else. Did you have discretion to do anything, or pretty much you had to stay with the criteria for that specific mission?
As fast facts, we pretty much had our own discretion. If it was, say, a normal mission down there, and we were looking to interdict trucks and stuff coming south, and if we saw like surface-to-air missiles or anything, we didn't have to ask anyone, hey, can we bomb those, anything. We had to be careful with waterborne craft off the coast. We had one of our guys one time, they had a Chinese freighter they caught, and he said, hey, it's a small boat. And it was like, how small? No, you can't hit the Chinese freighter. They already knew about it. But we pretty much, we had some constraints when we went up north. Like there was a Chinese buffer zone. You couldn't go near the China border. And yeah, some of the guys that went up north, all the way up north, Hanoi, Haiphong, they got restricted. Like we never figured it out. They wouldn't let them bomb the airfields. And we were losing airplanes to MiGs. And finally, they said, yes, you can start striking the airfields.
There was a concern for a long time where if they went and bombed Haiphong Harbor and you had some Russian ships and some other Russian soldiers there, that they would draw Russia into the
war,
and make it larger.
Yeah.
And if I remember correctly, the Russians had intelligence people that were assisting in that war.
Oh, yes. There was info. We knew of missions guys flew, and they came back and between hitting surface-to-air missile sites and command and control centers, or we found out later that their Russian advisors were killed that were in there.
I think didn't they put some Russian pilots in some of the North Vietnamese planes?
Yeah, initially, but I think when we were there, it was pretty much all North Vietnamese flying the MiGs up there. And I think history has shown that there wasn't. Early on, they had some Russian and Chinese pilots, they're pretty sure, but in my time frame, the MiGs were all flown by the North Vietnamese.
Oh, well, of course, there's got to be, I imagine there was some training done. I mean, they were flying Russian-made planes, so there had to be some involvement there. So how many sorties would you say that you went on in a week?
Probably 11, roughly about 5 a week. It varied. When the invasion occurred in April of '72, we were flying just about every day.
And once you'd go up, how long were you up during your mission? About on
like
average?
if you were escorting the gunships and stuff, depending how soon you expended your ordnance, they could vary from a little over an hour to 2 hours maybe. We had some missions where we carried purely laser-guided bombs, and we were in an orbit. Either the gunships had lasers or the OV-10 FACs did. So we'd wait for their call, and sometimes those only lasted like an hour and a half, but some of those lasted a couple hours again. The Fast Fact mission was probably the longest one. That was generally about with the refuelings, if I remember right, it was about a 3.5 up to 4 hour mission at night.
Wow. And that's without refueling?
Oh, no.
Yeah. Or you'd
A
have to
normal
refuel.
Fast Fact mission, we'd refuel at least 3 times, more, a lot of times 4.
Right. Wow. So it's amazing. So you're up in that air, and so people appreciate. I mean, you are a target in that, because surface-to-air missiles was definitely prevalent technology.
Oh, yeah.
That they used back then, and gosh, that's that. Now, can you describe what your experience was like? When you first went into the military?
When I first went in, ROTC and, of course, Wisconsin, University of Wisconsin, where I went in the late 60s, was not very friendly place. And a lot of times in ROTC, we didn't wear our uniforms just to avoid confrontation. When I went in, I went to Air Force Navigator School out at Mather Air Force Base in Sacramento, California. Sacramento was a pretty military-friendly town. There were 3 bases in it. And from there, I went training down at Davis-Monthan Air Force Base in Tucson, Arizona. And, they had the University of Arizona there, but it still wasn't, what you'd call really confrontational and bad. I mean, we could go into town anywhere, and, I never felt threatened, or no one I knew did.
Right. I mean, I guess the more you gravitated towards where the bases were, because those are a big thing in their economy. I mean,
yeah.
you've got thousands and thousands of men
Yeah.
and women that go out, eat, and buy
Oh, yeah.
groceries and so on. So now going through and at the end of the war, when did you separate with the
The Air Force?
Air Force?
I spent a little over 20 years in the Air Force.
So sometime after Vietnam.
career.
And
Yeah.
Yes.
And so, after you came back from Vietnam, you spent some time in the Air Force, and
Right.
And,
When I came back from Vietnam, in Vietnam I was what we call a WISO, or a backseater. I flew in the back seat of the F-4, and we had a pilot up front, and I'd be in the back. When I got back, I went to a base in New Mexico for a short time, and then I applied for and was selected for flight school. So I went to pilot training, as we call it in the Air Force, and completed that, and then went right back to the front seat of the F-4. After I went through front seat training out in Luke Air Force Base in Phoenix, Arizona. From there, I went up to Hill Air Force Base in Ogden, Utah, spent a couple years up there. From there, I went over to Hahn Air Base, Germany, and spent a little over 2 years there. After that, I became an advisor to the Egyptian Air Force in Cairo. Spent a year there, went back to New Mexico, was an instructor pilot in what we called fighter lead-in training. Left there, went to Texas in the F-4 again, and I was on an inspection team, and I flew with the Guard and Reserve for 3 years at different locations, back to New Mexico, and then I retired.
it's amazing. So, what did you do after you retired from the military
And what brought you here?
in Bear Country?
Yeah.
Yes. Well, after I retired from the Air Force, I was in the I was a commercial airline pilot. I retired, a little over 5 years ago I was a captain for Southwest Airlines. I flew for Southwest for just shy of 20 years. And I initially flew for Southwest out of Phoenix, Arizona. And in the airline business, seniority is everything, and everyone wanted to be down there. And I didn't have a good seniority and didn't get, the greatest of schedules. And I hate to put a ding on the Phoenix Chamber of Commerce, but it's just too darn hot down there. I like
That it
seasons.
is.
My wife likes seasons. So we moved up here. I flew out of Chicago for my last 10 years at Midway with Southwest Airlines. And my seniority greatly improved. You know, it's like doing the midnight radio show versus the 2 o'clock in the afternoon radio
Right,
show.
or the morning drive.
Yeah. And we ended up over here in Valpo because my brother is an IU grad,
Okay.
and he did a student teaching in Crown Point. And he told me this is a nice area, so we kind of started our house search, and we found Valpo and said, we like it here. So we bought a house here, and we've been here for 15 years
All
now.
right.
Wow, great. So, so Southwest, gosh, do you ever fly in and out of Love Field?
Oh, yes.
So the hub of Southwest?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's where our training was and everything.
Yeah, awesome. It's an awesome
Yeah, it is.
airline company. It's friendly. They're friendly.
They are.
Very friendly.
They
and,
are.
yeah,
Great place to
comical.
work.
Yes.
I had 2 great careers, so can't complain about either one.
I still remember one of the announcements made shortly we came on a Southwest flight, which is unusual boarding. For those of you boarded, they used to hand out these passes, and they called
Plastic.
them pass numbers, and you were allowed in the plane. But I remember getting on, and this is back in the 80s, I believe. You know, this had to be about 10 years when they did away from smoking. And they said, well, we do, when the stewardess came on and said, we do have a smoking section still on the plane. It is on the left wing. You're more than welcome to.
Yeah.
That's what we enjoyed about Southwest. They're constantly putting on show
They
tunes.
are a lot of
and-
fun, yeah.
Yeah, they are fun. They are fun. So, gosh, is there anything else that you'd like to share with us there in the?
Well, I'd like to know, when you got back to the States, how were you treated? I mean, what was it like for you coming back from Vietnam?
I remember coming back, the way it worked back then is the day you left the States to go over there was the day you got to get on what we called the Freedom Bird coming home. So I just happened to work out. I left the States on December 7th of 71. So we got on the Freedom Bird at Ubon on December 7th. Ended up up through Alaska into Travis Air Force Base. And from there, I went over to San Francisco International to fly home to Chicago. And I didn't get the horrible harassment that some people got, but I didn't get a overly friendly welcome either. I kind of got the look away and they told us, change out of your uniform to do that. And I did. We took our uniforms
Civilian
off.
clothes
Yeah.
and
And when I got home to Green Bay, of course, my whole family was there and had a big welcome, and nobody said too much. I had a couple guys I went to high school with said, "Oh, you were, blah blah blah." And I
Right.
just ignored them.
right.
It's interesting you say that because I was discharged December the 7th of 1969. And we all know what happened on December the 7th of 1941. When I came back, very similar situation. Of course, I was discharged at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, and everything I owned was in my car. I mean, everything. I even put the television set that I had in the passenger seat of my car, and just enough room for me to get in. And I drove back, and I came back to my hometown, and it was in December, so I did some part-time work, but I knew I was going back to college at Indiana State. And when I went back to Indiana State in January of, that would have been January of 1970, and you sit in class, and they kind of go around the room, what's your experience so when I just said, well, I just finished 3 years in the military. Even the professor he didn't do anything. He just moved on to the next student. There was nothing like thank you for your service. There wasn't anything.
Right.
Because even at the smaller colleges, there was such an anti-war sentiment.
Well, I remember last year at the veterans at Applebee's when we were interviewing some of the veterans, and one of the guys said the same thing. He got into California. In the hangar, they were told to change out of their clothes, but he said even when he got back, he had stopped at a VFW hall to get a beer, and there was a World War II and Korean veteran there who didn't want to serve him. I mean, that's your own, and I just was flabbergasted by this and just wondered.
I've heard that story, and it's true many times. In fact, after Vietnam, my brother-in-law served in the Army in Vietnam. When he came back, he went down to, I can't remember if it was VFW or Legion, and, he walked in and said, hey, can I join? I think it was the VFW, but back then, and they said, what war were you in? He said, well, I just got back from Vietnam. He said, we're need or want any of you guys.
It's just incomprehensible to me that could happen.
Yeah,
you-
people had to remember during that period of time there was a draft going on, so a good percentage of the
Right.
people over there, I mean, they had no choices that or be incarcerated. Or moved to Canada,
Right.
which Canada increased population, but so it's troublesome. And let me ask this question. It may be a bit rhetorical, but what are your emotions, your feelings when you see military come back now and they're celebrated?
Oh, I think we all know it's long overdue. It's wonderful. And I don't ever look and say, well, I didn't get that, or I feel that. No, never crosses my mind. This is what always should have been done. And I don't say, oh, these people didn't welcome me back or anything. But this is what should have been done, is being done. And I'm so glad for them, because what they're doing today is a whole lot different what we did back then, in getting involved and in the fighting they're in and everything.
I'll interject that it's people like Steve and other members of the Kiwanis, myself. It is the Vietnam era guys and gals that are changing it for the people today. It started out with the gentleman who got started with the Vietnam War Memorial. There would be no World War II or Korean War Memorial if the Vietnam guys hadn't been active enough to push for the Vietnam Wall. And the other guys came back from Korea, which was often the forgotten war. World War II, the guys were just so worn out, they just wanted to get on with their lives. They weren't thinking about any of this stuff. So the fact that the Vietnam era folks we're doing these types of dinners. One of the other ones that we started about 5 years ago with Kiwanis called Salute the Recruits.
Yes.
And that is usually the first or second week of June, right after high school graduations. We pointed out that, kids who are academically inclined, they get scholarships and recognition. Kids who are athletes, they get their letter jackets, they get recognition. But the kids who go right out of high school into the military were getting nothing. And it was basically their own family members. So what we wound up doing is we changed that 5 years ago. And then last year, because of the success we had with the Veterans Appreciation Dinner, we moved the Salute the Recruits to the evening time also. And we came within 20 seats of selling that out.
Yes,
this
and
year.
it was such a beautiful evening.
Yes.
I was so proud to be there and to see those young men and women who are taking that risk and just saying, you know what, I don't want to go to college right now. I don't want to go get a job. I want to serve my country. And gosh, how beautiful is that?
It was kind of a neat experience because in many cases their parents were there, their family members were there, and it almost resembled in a way, telling them thank you. It's and it's difficult to do because they could be sent overseas to fight, but just the support that they receive from the community and their family in that event. And again, the VU band was there again, and we called each service up by branch of service and honored them. And one of them was so large they couldn't even get all on the stage.
We got them all on one table. Well,
Yeah.
actually, a table and a half, I
They
think.
fit.
They were awesome. And I know one of the things that I do as a professor at Ivy Tech is on opening day for every class. One of my PowerPoint slides has all 5 branches of the military SEALs. And I say, do I have any veterans in here? And the first thing I do is I salute them and I shake their hand, because that wasn't done, for any of us. And so our generation, although we were not welcome back, so to speak, we are changing that for the
Yes, you
current
are.
group of people.
Yeah.
And keep in mind, the burden of serving in the military is falling on really a select group of kids. I just ran into somebody at a restaurant the other day. He's third generation Marines.
I was just going to say, it seems like there's a
Oh,
legacy,
lot-
and it's always
lot of
so
legacy guys.
You
so
know, a lot-
exciting to
yes,
see,
yeah, yes.
some kids saying, "Yeah, I'm joining the Marines. My dad was a Marine. My grandfather was a Marine. My uncle was a Marine." That
Yeah.
makes me so proud.
I know my generation and the guys I served over there with, yes, I was Air Force, but we knew we were not over there because it was fun to fly jet fighters. We knew we were there for the grunts on the ground is what we were there for.
Right.
We knew that. And we've taken the attitude that, yeah, maybe we were forgotten, but none of these guys are going to be forgotten. And I look across guys like Lenny and everybody I know that was over there at that time frame. I've got Army helicopter buddies. I got Marines. I don't admit that very often, but no, my Marine buddies, and it's the same thing. We all have the same. We're going to make sure these guys are, one, not forgotten, but two, taken care of.
Right, and nobody has to go through what you guys have gone through before.
Yeah, and make sure they get everything they need taken care of.
And when you talk about training, there's very few that are better than the military. Example of that, we've had 3 Afghanistan and Middle East veterans that were here talking on a show, and as always, we ask our guests to come ahead of time, usually about 15 to 20 minutes ahead of time. Well, we usually get here about an hour. Well, these guys were here before we got here.
Yes, they were.
And so I said, "Why'd you get here so early?" And they always prefaced everything with "sir," and they said, "Sir, we had to recon the building." And I began thinking, "Oh gosh, are we in danger here?" And I realized he was not kidding. They got there just
Yeah.
to make sure where the entrance was and all.
Check it out.
Yeah, check it out, and that's what military life gives you, is a discipline and being on time, and that's something I always speak out to our listening audience. If you're a business owner, by all means, if you have a veteran, you have an opportunity to hire a veteran, boy, they're going to be the most dedicated, on-time people that you can
And
imagine.
I tell you, as a professor, they are great students. They are great students. And I've told this to Steve, and I know I've told both of you, I owe everything I have today due to my 3 years in the military. I was not structured. I came from a really good family, but I wasn't structured. I didn't have a self-discipline. I didn't have the academic guidance. And it was when I went in the military that you didn't have any choice but to follow the structure and to be on time and make sure all your buttons are buttoned. And
That's right.
yes, you are going to get out of bed at 4:30 in the morning, whether you like it or not.
And to bounce that quarter off the sheets.
That's right.
I had trouble with that.
But it was, going back, my parents came from humble means, but out of the 7 years of college that I had, the GI Bill paid for 5 of my 7 years of college. I wouldn't have all the education without the GI Bill. And I wouldn't have met my wonderful wife of 45 years at Indiana State. When I went back is when I met her. And so the lifestyle that I've had, I know he's very appreciative of the lifestyle that he's had and what he owes back to the community because what has happened and his good fortune. The same thing for me. I wouldn't. It was rough. But I wouldn't change a thing.
No, wouldn't trade it for anything.
And people just don't understand that. And I think sometimes the newer generation doesn't like to be told what to do, but it's good. It's good for you, and they push you beyond what level you think you can be pushed, and it makes you a better person as a result.
Yeah, for those of you who don't know Lenny, he just reminds me of a drill sergeant. Yeah, in fact, I want to ask this because I heard a rumor going around because you're going to be president of the Kiwanis Club next year.
I'm
right?
president-elect this year. I'll be
President-elect
president next year.
Next
yes.
year. So there's worry around about the happy dollar thing, that if people don't give enough, that they'll have to drop and do like 50 push-ups.
Yes.
Is this?
In fact, one of the things, now I don't want this to get out because I know the Kiwanis are going to see this for the show, but last year to promote sales, I said for every table of 10, I would do 10 push-ups. And there was one day, there were 2 tables sold, and I had to do 20 push-ups, and I said, please don't allow 3 tables to be sold in one day. Can we space it out? And what they did as a little joke, is after it was all over with, there were about, 8 people that came up and they did one push-up in honor of the sales that I had made for the Veterans Appreciation Dinner. So it's pretty funny. So.
Wow. Oh, man. Well, congratulations on that, and looking forward to working with you again next year.
It's going to be a great time, and I know that you guys not only will be there to welcome the veterans, but you're also planning on doing the Applebee's show again, I believe, on that
Absolutely.
Sunday. So, again, I'll put the plug in for us. Again, the Veterans Appreciation Dinner is going to be on Wednesday, November the 7th, the day after the elections, from 5:30 to 8:30 p.m. Tickets can be purchased at any First Source Bank. Tickets are $20 per person. We have dinner in a cash bar. Also, the tickets can be purchased from any Rotarian or Kiwanian. Rotary meets at the Old Town Banquet Center from 11:30 to 1, and our Kiwanis group meets from 11:30 to 1 on Wednesdays of each week. So those are various areas, and again, the dinner will take place at the Old Town Banquet Center.
And no tickets sold at the door.
No tickets sold at the door.
You gotta
The
get 'em early.
last day to purchase a ticket will be November the 1st, because we have to put the head count in for the food.
Perfect.
Great. And with that, we got to get you going because
Yes.
you're late for the
Yes.
our
Kiwanis
Kiwanis.
meeting.
Yeah, our
Yeah,
Kiwanis
our
meeting,
Kiwanis
yes, we
meeting.
got to be over there.
Wednesday.
And you also
Thank
do
you.
something like 50 push-ups if you're
Yeah,
late.
yeah, exactly. We want to thank, Steve and I both want to thank you both for
Right.
hosting us on the show.
Having us here.
You've done a great job last year, this year. And just Steve's story is, there's so many more stories, and we have several other veterans in our club, and we'd like to bring on your show in the future as well.
Absolutely.
Right, and also at Applebee's because we'll be
Oh,
bringing
absolutely,
yes.
our equipment with us to record some of the
Of those stories.
stories
as well.
that we hear. So,
Absolutely.
with that, we'd like to wish you well. First of all, we would like to thank you
Again,
for coming
for
on, the
You're
guest,
welcome.
Coming
as
on
a
You're
and
guest
for
welcome.
again.
your service
And,
as well.
Come
you're
back
always
any-
welcome here.
Come back anytime.
I appreciate that, and with that, we will end the show, and we wish you a very safe week and weekend.
Yes.
Goodbye for now.
Bye.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.